Oh, good morning. I guess, Steve, I will be in listen-only mode now. No, I guess I'll be doing a little bit of talking. It's my pleasure. You'll hear more from me later, as well as my boss, the director of the Office of Water Protection, Dr. Thomas Graziano. But now it's my privilege to introduce our chief scientist, NOAA's chief scientist, Dr. CIROH Kapnick. Dr. Kapnick, are you with us? Well, I'm going to introduce Dr. Kapnick anyway.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
there she
here.
is.
Can you hear?
Perfect. It's good to see you for a variety of reasons. It's good to see all of you. I was not sure that we would be here. So this is much more rewarding for me, for Tom, for Dr. Kapnick than doing this as a video call. Dr. Kapnick is the chief scientist for NOAA. In her role, she is responsible for advancing policy and program for NOAA's science and technology priorities. Dr. Kapnick has extensive experience at the intersection of climate science and economics. Most recently, she served as the managing director of JP Morgan in the role of senior climate scientist and sustainability strategist for asset and wealth management. While at JP Morgan, Dr. Kapnick supported sustainability and climate action efforts and served as an advisor on new business and investment opportunities and risk. Previously, Dr. Kapnick was a physical scientist and a deputy division leader on seasonal to decadal variability and predictability at NOAA's Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. I actually met Dr. Kapnick in that capacity when she presented results back, I don't want to date either of us, but it was closer to a decade. And her work with the high floor model was transformational in showing that the climate linkage, the need to resolve elevations above 10,000 feet is critical for resolving water resources. Because without water in the West, particularly in Western US, without resolving those elevation bands, there's no snowpack. Without snowpack, there is no water. Without water, there's no society. So Dr. Kapnick, I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to you. Good morning, and thank you for being with us.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I really apologize that I'm not able to be there in person. Like all of you, I've also lost my voice a bit, so hopefully I'm coming through clearly. These issues you are discussing at this meeting are top of mind for me as a hydroclimate scientist and for NOAA, since issues related to surface water are only increasing. As a nation, we are faced with many water challenges, especially in the context of a changing climate, including flooding, drought, water availability, and water quality. These challenges affect all economic sectors, from agriculture to utilities, and the impacts are escalating. I've engaged with stakeholders across these sectors and have heard firsthand the changes they are experiencing and the concerns they have for the future. Collectively, these challenges represent a threat to our economic and national security. Population growth and economic development, particularly in flood and drought-prone regions, are stressing water supplies and increasing the vulnerabilities facing communities and businesses. An aging water infrastructure is forcing critical, expensive decisions, and the socioeconomic risks of floods and droughts are escalating. In recent years, flooding disasters in the US represented some of the costliest natural hazard events in terms of life and property loss. The changing climate is intensifying the impacts to water availability and quality, further increasing the uncertainty and the risk facing the nation. Decision makers across government and in the private sector are looking to NOAA for research and products that can help them to make more informed decisions, recognizing that past conditions may no longer be a sufficient predictor of future conditions. Put another way by Chris Milley, stationarity is dead. The research of CIROH is at the forefront of this work. We need both modeling and comprehensive observation systems to track the extremes of drought and flooding, but also all the states in between critical to managing our water resources to support communities, ecosystems, and the economy. This is necessitating new observations and tools, as well as the development and use of improved water modeling, such as the National Water Model and the Next Gen Water Resources Modeling Framework, and fully coupled Earth system modeling approaches such as UFS, which leverage the rapid expansion of the available data and technology. I am happy to report that the National Water Model version 3.0, which represents the sixth implementation of the National Water Model since its initial deployment in 2016, was deployed operationally on September 20th. For the first time ever, the National Weather Service is issuing a nationally consistent total water level forecast for the East, Gulf, and Pacific coasts, as well as Hawaii and Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. With this implementation, approximately 120 million people, roughly a third of the U.S. population, have an improved level of forecast service today that they did not have previously. Additionally, the National Water Model version 3.0 provides a first ever national water model forecast for portions of Alaska. The increased risk and impacts of flooding has additionally necessitated the development and deployment of real-time flood inundation mapping capability, with initial deployment by the National Weather Service for the first 10% of the U.S. population this year on September 26th. This effort is built upon collaboration with federal, academic, and private sector partners through the National Water Center's Innovators Program and Summer Institute, as well as 4 years of experience gained through participation in the 2 consecutive Department of Commerce agency priority goals in fiscal year 2018 to 2019 and fiscal year 2020 to 2021. For more than 2 decades, the emergency management community has articulated a growing need for real-time, detailed, actionable, street-level flood inundation maps depicting the aerial extent, depth, and infrastructure impacted by floodwaters. The implementation of this flood inundation mapping capability addresses a longstanding need of the emergency management community and is widely recognized as transformational in nature. The demands for these types of products and the need to be agile and innovative to respond to these needs are growing. It is through our work with all of you that we will be able to continue to advance these modeling and mapping capabilities and related services. In the face of these growing challenges and needs, we are in the midst of an unprecedented opportunity born from clear congressional direction, e.g., for example, the IU's reauthorization Title III, Floods Act, Precipitation Act Division D, and afforded by the resources provided by the bipartisan infrastructure law. In order to best leverage this unprecedented opportunity, partnerships are key. We need to continue to work together as a program to employ the best science and technology while also ensuring that enhanced information and services created are actionable by the diverse water resources community. In collaboration with NOAA and other agency partners, the CIROH Consortium is more important now than ever for adding the key research problems that we are facing. The cutting-edge expertise to address the key research problems we are facing is essential. CIROH provides the cutting-edge expertise that is essential for responding to emerging needs and also serves as a key conduit to communicate with stakeholders and to educate the public about water science and ways to mitigate disasters and better manage our increasingly limited water supply, enhancing public safety, as well as our nation's economic vitality and national security. There's an increasing spotlight on the needs related to water resources, and we want to have the research foundation to ensure that we can be responsive to these needs. I appreciate all of the work that you are doing to make our communities, infrastructure, and assets safer in a changing climate. The value of the work you are doing cannot be overstated, and I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kapnick. We certainly appreciate you being here with us, if not in person, in spirit. I think I now turn it over to Christy to walk us through the beginning of our remarks.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Christy Westcott. I work for the Office of Water Prediction. So we do have some of our colleagues that aren't able to join us here today, but we do have some in person, like Ed. So I'm going to go through our priorities. We're going to start off with the Office of Water Prediction's priorities. So we have Ed Clark here as the director of the National Water Center. And on the phone, we have Tom Graziano, who is the director of the Office of Water Prediction. We also will be joined by Fred, who is going to be joining us for the priorities as well. He's our chief scientist at the Office of Water Prediction.
Tom, are you with us?
I am, Ed, and can you hear me? Can you hear me, Ed?
I can hear you now, Tom.
Okay, great. Hey, I just was wondering while we still have Dr. Kapnick online, if anyone in the room perhaps had a question for Dr. Kapnick while we still had her, that we could afford her the opportunity to respond.
Are there any questions for NOAA's chief scientist?
And Dr. Kapnick, thanks very much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate you starting us off so well, and looking forward to really a great day with the consortium members, and appreciate your comments. So just wondering if anybody in the audience has any questions for our chief scientist.
I've got one in the back, Dr. Ames. Thank you. We're sprinting across, well.
So it's pretty exciting and interesting with the release of some funds to have some industrial partners help with upgrading and improving the national watermark. I don't know all the details and the dates on that, but I think it was pretty recent. So just the question is, how do you foresee the partnership now proceeding with the CIROH consortium and the industry partners and so forth to really move the national water model forward? Thanks.
That's a great question. Tom, would you like to take that, or Dr. Kapnick?
Perhaps Dr. Kapnick, do you want me to take that one? That's something we were actually going to talk about in the next presentation.
Why don't you give a direct question or response, and then I'll give a high level thought on it as well.
Great. So Dan, the contract that you're referring to is with RTX, a significant contract. In fact, the largest as it relates to water resources with NOAA in really our history, and to advance our water modeling and mapping capabilities, and quite frankly, from a deliverable perspective, to develop the next generation water resources modeling framework and optimization environment, advance our hydrofabric, as well as advance our mapping capabilities that were recently deployed, that we're on track to deploy nationally over the next 3 years. And what we see is the deliverables or output of the work under the auspices of that contract being a conduit for the great work that we're doing under the auspices of CIROH to essentially establish a really important symbiotic relationship or triad among the three entities, NOAA, RTX, and CIROH. So we think the future is very bright, and that with the development of the next gen framework, and again, that conduit, it's really going to accelerate the R2O transition of this great work into our to new operational capability. So Dr. Kapnick, over to you.
I will add that here with the water model, but then also broadly across NOAA, we're seeing the importance of such partnerships to be able to make sure that we're developing our science for stakeholder needs. It's always been a part of the process, and I'm really glad that we, with the funding from these various legislation, that we can make sure that we're really supporting those efforts for these key scientific areas that we're pushing forward. And I also say that in other specific places where we really need to rapidly intensify our innovation and speed it up and transition from research into operations and other uses of the research, the partnerships are really critical also for bringing in subject matter expertise that we don't have within NOAA to be able to create those collaborations, those interdisciplinary interfaces, so we can actually also really take the biological, the physical, and chemical information that we have, that we develop in NOAA, and then couple that with the other information that we're getting from the outside and the expertise in specific types of areas. And so we're really excited about the use of our partnerships, and this one in particular, to making sure that we advance the NOAA mission.
Thanks, Dr. Kapnick. Any other questions from the audience for Dr. Kapnick?
Yeah, we have one more. Dr.
Okay.
Wood.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Dr. Kapnick. Great to see you. Thanks for the talk. I know that climate and S2S prediction is, near and dear to your heart. And as I go through the priorities for FY24, we do have climate in there. It's mostly coming from USGS and the Corps of Engineers and their priorities. So I wonder if you could comment on opportunities that CIROH may have to partner up with other cooperative institutes or labs within NOAA, and how you might facilitate or encourage that.
Yeah, I encourage and hope that you all feel empowered to seek out the collaborations to be able to further develop your research. With the funding in IRA, we have there's a lot of different projects around development of initialization and data assimilation across NOAA. And so there's going to be a lot going on in terms of the fundamentals of S2S prediction. And so I welcome making sure that those collaborations are taking place and that people are seeking them out to advance those areas of their sciences. And I think the fundamental R&D that you guys perform or produce is lays the groundwork for the future predictability that we have in the future, also knowing where we can go in our modeling and where we can go with this research. And so I look forward to the work that you do at CIROH, but then also, form those collaborations that are unique and are going to advance your science in new directions by bringing in different types of expertise and collaborators that are unique to be able to get those intersections, because that's where we're having the real advancements in this field right now.
Thank you. Any other questions, Ed, from the audience?
I'm looking,
Okay.
seeing no hands. So, Dr. Kapnick, I want to thank you again. Thank you for taking the time this morning. I know 2 days into the new fiscal year is not a calm time. So sincerely, thank you for taking the time to be with us. And as always, we really look forward to your leadership.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And from subject matter expertise, the work that you guys all do is near and dear to my heart. So please keep it up. And I really look forward to hearing the outcomes of this meeting today. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kapnick.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, Tom, you take us away.
All right, Ed. And are the slides up on the screen? I can't see them. So
They are.
okay.
Tom, see them from his end?
I see you, Ed, which is
We present the slides.
there we go. All right,
There we go.
outstanding.
Perfect.
I've got it now. All right. Good morning, everybody. Nice to be with you, if only virtually. Wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, those of us not in Tuscaloosa are not able to travel to the meeting this year, but hopefully, we won't run into this situation in coming years. Next slide, please. So as Sarah mentioned, there are a number of growing challenges related to water nationally, whether it be too much, too little, poor quality. Whether we turn on the evening news or read the newspaper on the web, whatever, there are headlines on a routine, if not daily basis as it relates to those challenges. And we're looking forward to continuing and deepening and strengthening this partnership to address these growing challenges that face the nation, both from an economic and national security perspective. Next slide, please. Well, what drives us? Well, our vision and our mission, and our vision, at least as the National Weather Service, is creating or establishing our strategic outcome of a weather really and water ready nation, so that society is prepared for and responds to extreme weather, water, and climate events. And our mission related to that is providing weather, water, climate data forecasts and warnings, and in bold here, an impact-based decision support services for the protection of life and property and the enhancement of the national security. And that addition in bold there is new as of less than 2 years ago, to highlight the increased emphasis on the communication of the message, that it's not just a physical science problem, it's also a social science problem as it relates to ensuring that we provide information in a comprehensible, actionable format so that people can respond appropriately to get themselves out of harm's way or, make an informed decision as it relates to the water challenges that we face. As we like to say, the intrinsic value of a clairvoyant forecast is essentially zero if it's not well communicated. So not only do we have to continue to invest in improving our ability to observe and predict, but also to communicate that message to all that need to hear it in a way that they can respond to it appropriately. Next slide, please. Some other key drivers, the DOC strategic plan, which was released in 2022. If you leaf your way to the 43rd page of that document, you will see this text. It speaks to increasing the impact of climate data and services, building essentially a climate-ready nation, and that includes enhanced water services across all timescales. And what you'd see listed on that page, as well as the first key performance indicator, is the implementation of real-time flood inundation mapping services for the entirety of the U.S. And as Dr. Kapnick mentioned, and as Ed will highlight here in a little bit, we took a first big step on the 26th of September last month to implement real-time flood inundation mapping capabilities for the first 10% of the U.S. population. So we're very excited about that. This is a long-standing need of the emergency management community. And really, we see it as transformational as it relates to flood services, particularly with the issuance of warnings. Next slide, please. Another key driver is our new strategic plan in the Weather Service. And this is about ensuring access to the new technology and tools to provide these enhanced water services. Next generation observing systems and modeling systems, and delivering actionable inland coastal water resource and inundation information across all timescales. So it's, as we'll talk about, Ed will talk about in a little bit with regard to the bipartisan infrastructure law provision 3. As you'll remember, you know, the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act led to the bipartisan infrastructure law. There were 18 provisions. The third provision therein was for coastal and inland flood forecasting and inundation mapping, as well as next generation water resources modeling, and as well as precipitation studies. And so we'll get into the details of all that here in a little bit. But really, this strategic plan speaks to leveraging those new resources to enhance our program, to deliver enhanced services, to build a weather and water ready nation and meet mission, right? And so in addition, the last bullet here is about communicating the information effectively, as we spoke to. And if you look at the 4 pillars that define the research done under CIROH, again, it speaks to and focuses on, you know, advanced water prediction capability, community modeling, developing advanced hydroinformatics capabilities, and then conducting the social behavior and economic science work that needs to be done to ensure we communicate the message effectively to everyone, to all communities across the country. Next slide, please. The National Water Model, Dr. Kapnick also spoke to this, first implemented across the continental United States on the 16th of August, 2016. And as Dr. Kapnick mentioned, we just on the 20th of September released or implemented on our Weather and Climate Operational Supercomputing System, or WCOS version 3.0, which represents the 6th implementation of the National Water Model. And again, this is a significant complement in terms of guidance to the official river forecasts that are delivered by the 13 river forecast centers across the country, providing forecasts for 3.4 million river miles, or 2.7 million stream or river segments. And that it's not only critical that it provides that spatial definition, but that it also supports the delivery of these real-time flood inundation maps. And so the services that we just began to provide on the 26th of September last week include an analysis born from the National Water Model, a 5-day inundation map born from the River Forecast Center's official river forecasts, and then a 5-day inundation map born from the National Water Model forecast. So those are the 3 initial pieces of information that we're providing to the emergency management community and the general public and all to inform critical decisions on the local scale as they relate to flooding. Next slide, please. More on the National Water Model here. And this is sort of our essentially describes our evolution leading up to what will be version 4.0 of the National Water Model and projected implementation on WCOS in 2026. Why is that so important? Because that will be the first version of the National Water Model where we plan to employ the next generation water resources modeling framework. And integrated into that framework, we plan to leverage a lot of the great work that's currently underway under the auspices of CIROH, and then as well as in subsequent implementations thereof. So, we're working with RTX, formerly known as Raytheon, under this large contract, which was just released, awarded a few weeks ago, to develop the version of that framework that we implement on WCOS. And so long as the work that comes out of CIROH meets the standards that we've established, BMI and WaterML version 2.0, we can plug them into this framework and utilize that to enhance our predictive capabilities nationwide and employ an approach which doesn't use a single modeling approach, but rather a heterogeneous approach. So running the right model in the right place for the right reason to get the right result. So we're really excited about that and really think it portends a significant sort of quantum leap forward, moving forward as it relates to our predictive skill. Next slide, please. And of course, we've mentioned the next generation water resources modeling framework and some of its key characteristics being model agnostic, standards-based, science-driven, open source code, and domain science friendly. So you don't have to be a hardcore computer scientist to work with the code and add benefit. So, and this is really born, these standards that have been established are really born from a lot of collaborative work among the federal agencies as well as across the enterprise and with CIROH over the past couple of years, enhanced significantly by the CIROH workshop focused on next gen this past spring. And looking forward to future workshops focused on building that community of practice around the next generation water resources modeling framework. Next slide, please. And Ed, this is where I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Tom. The other major investment that's been achieved or major accomplishment that's been achieved this year was the release or the full implementation of the Hydrologic Ensemble Forecast Service, or HEFS version 1.0. This was achieved back in May with forecasts provided now at 3,400 locations. As Rob Hartman, who's in the audience, will know this was a priority for nearly a decade in the Office of Water Prediction across the Weather Service. And with the help and the leadership from the 13 forecast centers who are represented today on the call with the development operations hydrologist, we met the goal. HEFS spends lead time, characterizes the uncertainty both from the meteorology and the hydrology, lead times from 1 hour out to 1 year. They're reliable and skillful. It's currently leveraging GEFS, or the Global Ensemble Forecast Service, version 12. Each time a new meteorological model is deployed, we have to go through the hindcast process to characterize the reliability. And again, this leads to dependable, actionable information. And as those who are tracking the success of the forecast-informed reservoir operations, or CIROH, inclusion of HEFS forecasts into the decision support applications of our partners like the Corps of Engineers or New York City Department of Environmental Protection are key to the full utilization of this technology. As Tom said, on the 26th of September, just last week, we released the first 10% of the inundation maps for portions of Texas and New York, literally putting water on a map. Transforming how we communicate, how we provide impact-based decision support services from the 122 weather forecast offices in coordination and conjunction with the 13 forecast centers. This is how we produce information, provide information today. What you see is an image of the Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service, or AHAPS, hydrograph on the left. On the lower left is the impact statement. It says that at 59.5 feet, major lowland flooding begins along Sequoia State subdivision. Well, this is a fairly abstract and esoteric way to look at flooding and communicate. This is what that looks like on the ground. This is actual water intelligence developed in coordination with the academic community and furthered by the CIROH Consortium. Actionable water intelligence, water on a map. And you see those two impact areas that are described in this blue box, but the impacts are obviously much, much larger than that. So again, continue to advance both through the contract as well through the CIROH consortium with projects like Dr. Cohen's. We're advancing FIM. We're advancing the FIM evaluation and validation as well as the underlying techniques and technologies. And as this quote here says, the emergency management simply cannot live without this. They cannot wait for this. This is a decades-long request for NOAA, for the Weather Service to provide these types of capabilities, and we're doing it in partnership with CIROH. Finally, this is an image that one of our Service Innovation and Partnership Division Director, Dr. David Valley, likes to use. This is his flood of record, March of 2010, his hometown underwater. When he went back and did a tabletop exercise as part of the agency priority goal back in 2020 and 2021, the information that came back from participants was that if they had that information at the time of that flood, they could have saved and prevented significant loss and damages. So as we said, we're at the first 10%. The areas are highlighted here in green, Northeast and Mid-Atlantic region. And of course, we wouldn't be doing this without the partnership with Dr. Maidman. So Texas is the west portions of West Gulf are highlighted. 2024, we're moving into the interior of the country, into Appalachia, and the full in this region, the south as well as in the northeast or northwest. You see that area highlighted in blue. That'll be implemented by September of this coming year, FY24. In FY25, we go into the interior of the country, the Great Plains, portions of California, completing portions of the Northeast as well as Appalachia. And then by 2026, we get to full coverage of the country. The cadence for doing this is, it's both one, rolling out the technology, but also it's the training and familiarization with the 122 weather forecast officers who will use this as a basis for their impact-based decision support services, the core component of our mission statement. We're also extremely excited to be working now in the NOAA Atlas 15 realm. These are the precipitation frequency estimates. Atlas 15 is under development, leveraging funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law, which I'll speak to here in a little bit, that will allow us to produce 2 volumes. Volume 1 will be an update, an OCONUS consistent update to the station observations. Then Volume 2 will apply which CIROH's advancing through a research project. Volume 2 will apply the climate outlooks to those estimates, so that this is no longer a stationary estimate of precipitation. This will account for future conditions that are so key to the future flood risk management services, or FFRMS, that colleagues like FEMA and other agencies are engaged with, redefining the future of flood insurance mapping. And then done with our colleagues at OER, we are finally, NOAA is getting back in the business of probable maximum precipitation, work that Dr. Kelly Mahoney is leading out of the Physical Sciences Lab out in Boulder. Tom, I think this is where I turn it back to you, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct, Ed. I'll take the next couple of slides and I'll hand it back. You know, Dr. Kapnick also mentioned some congressional drivers. And if you look back through the past history of legislation as it relates to water, specifically within NOAA, there's really a dearth of legislation. I mean, we had the Organic Act of 1890, which talked about flood warnings, providing signals of flood warnings on rivers. Then we had the Inland Flood and Forecast and Warning System Act of 2002, and really nothing else until December of 2020. And Dr. Kapnick mentioned the IUS reauthorization, more formally known as the Coordinated Ocean Observations and Research Act of 2020. And if you leaf your way to Title III within that legislation, it speaks to the roles, responsibilities, and functions of the new National Water Center. So it lays out very clearly what the authority of the National Water Center is. And at a very high level, 30,000-foot level, you can see some of that legislation here. To serve as a research and operations center of excellence for hydrologic analyses, forecasting, and related decision support services, to facilitate collaboration across federal and state departments, agencies, academia, and the private sector on matters relating to water resources. And it also defines functions as improving the understanding of water resources, stakeholder needs regarding water resources, and identifying really and addressing service gaps with all of you, and developing and implementing advanced water resources modeling capabilities, as we've been speaking to this morning. Facilitating R2O, delivering analyses, forecasts, inundation information, again, as we've been speaking to this morning, And then in coordination with warning coordination meteorologists and really service coordination hydrologists as well. The warning coordination hydrologists are the warning leads, if you will, at each of the 122 weather forecast offices. And the service coordination hydrologists play a similar role, although at the river forecast centers, even though they don't specifically issue warnings. But again, we have responsibility through the National Water Center to facilitate support and enhance level of coordination. Next slide, please, Ed. And then more recently, in just December of this past year in 2022, was additional legislation. There was the Floods Act. And if you look at the legislation there are 17 sections therein in the Floods Act that describe it. Section 3 describes a national integrated flood information system, which is essentially the flood analog to NIDIS, or the National Integrated Drought Information System. And it really, in large part, describes the flood warning, forecast and warning program of the National Weather Service. It speaks to observations and modeling for total water prediction. It defines the roles, responsibilities, and functions specifically of the service coordination hydrologists at the river forecast centers that I just mentioned. Talks about improving communication of future flood risks, monitoring, freshwater along the coast, establishing the NOAA Precipitation Frequency Atlas of the United States. First time in legislation, even though we've been doing this for several decades on a reimbursable basis, as Ed mentioned, with leveraging the BIL Provision 3 resources of the first direct appropriation to NOAA to support the development of these precipitation frequency data. And these, of course, as it speaks to in this legislation under Section 12, need to account for a changing climate, and therefore the 2 volumes that Ed just described. The Interagency Committee on Water Management and Infrastructure, also known as the Water Subcabinet, which has been in place for 4 to 5 years. This just simply codifies that in law beyond the executive order that was released in 2020. And then establish a Weather Service Hydrologic Research Fellowship Program. And we are excited about that. We still have a lot of work to do, but this will really support building a community of next generation hydrologic and hydrologic science experts, civil engineers to support our broad community, right? Moving these efforts forward. And then also speaks to conducting analysis of gaps in the availability of snow-related data. And that was an effort that Ed led across the federal sector, and that report is on its way to the Hill. And then making flood-related data available more readily to the public. And then the last piece of legislation that we simply wanted to highlight that also Dr. Kapnick mentioned was the Further Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act, or what we refer to simply as the Precip Act. And this speaks to the routine generation by NOAA of probable maximum precipitation estimates. So, essentially the max amount of rainfall over a particular area that you could theoretically extract from the atmosphere. And it's those data in concert with the precipitation frequency data that are used to inform the construction of all critical infrastructure nationwide. So with that, Ed, I will turn it back to you.
Thanks, Tom. So as we mentioned a few times, the bipartisan infrastructure law, or BIL, is a once in a generational opportunity for us. You read the legislation here. $492 million shall be for coastal and inland flood and inundation mapping and forecasting, the next generation water modeling activities, including modernized precipitation frequency and probable maximum precipitation studies. For the first time, this is an appropriation that puts action to work. We have, as discussed earlier, in September, we completed a 18-month-long process by which we awarded a contract to Raytheon. Very competitive process. This will support the Next Gen Water Resources Framework. They'll integrate the high-resolution topographic and bathymetric information into the hydrofabric, continue to advance that. There will be a cloud-based optimization and evaluation environment. This will help us configure the new next generation of national water model and provide a landing space for some of the research that's being done by CIROH. And then finally, we'll enhance the near real-time high spatial resolution flood information system. Extremely excited about this. We see it as a complement to CIROH, a landing point, not just in the operations of NOAA, but into a true hardened industry-supported platform that can be used not just by NOAA, but by the other federal agencies, including the Corps of Engineers, to advance our collaborative federal water predictive capabilities. You see the 5 thrust areas here in provision 3 of BIL. First is the coastal and freshwater inundation, working with the National Ocean Service to collect bathymetric information along the coast where it's not been updated for nearly 70 years, as well as in the inland waterways. We've talked about the precipitation frequency. Also in this concept is the building out a subseasonal to annual integrated water prediction capability, or looking at the inundation at the seasonal to subseasonal climate scales. We're improving the overall predictability and forecast skill with the next generation water model. And then there's been a critical investment of $40 million to social science, both within the National Weather Service and with the Weather Program Office in the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research. So really a trifecta of capabilities that advance our water prediction and water information across the country. And we have CIROH. This slide needs no further introduction other than that we are extremely fortunate, pleased, excited about entering the 3rd year of this relationship. It's the advancement of the water prediction capabilities, the application of the hydroinformatics, accelerating our community development, and leveraging and building that community, which Fred will speak to here in a little bit. And then the so what of this, the inclusion and the adoption of an application of social, economic, and behavioral sciences, really making this actionable by not just experts, the water resources scientists and engineers, but by society writ large. Of course, we can't do this alone. We have an opportunity to partner with the best academic institutions in the country. Working with all of you is key to advancing these goals. It is, like I said, a watershed moment. That is a pun, and it was intended. But there is really a groundswell of opportunity here from law, as Tom mentioned, opportunity, resourcing and appropriations, and community. And it is that trifecta, again, that really is so vital to advancing our capabilities. It's not easy. We're continuing the dialogue. We're here, as Steve said, listening, talking, learning, exploring, defining these new relationships, and also understanding what it means to go from research to operations. We have seen some tremendous successes. The first release of the public information for FIM, going on 2 years of supporting FEMA with this information, has shown the power of what we can do as a community when we organize, when we work together, when we leverage each other's strengths. So Fred will speak to the next year's priorities, but we're already seeing progress. Advancing Atlas 1415 with the work on particularly Volume 2. The next gen framework is alive and well. As Trey would say, it is proof of life. And we've seen that presented at the American Geophysical Union for 3 years now in a row. The advancement of FIM, program that Fernando Salas leads, and then again, the application of social, behavioral, and economic sciences. The emphasis here is open source, community, transparent research that can go into our operations framework, but is really a benefit to the nation and to the world in which we live. So I don't like this slide. It actually makes me pretty upset. This is a nursing home in Hurricane Harvey. There are residents who were not able to evacuate. These people look like many of my family members, trapped in floodwaters, unable to escape, life at risk, perhaps life lost. As a community, we can do something about this. This slide gives me hope, because less than 3 years after this image was taken, in response to Hurricane Ian, working together with our National Weather Service, weather forecast offices, leveraging the work that was done as part of the Summer Institute, partnership with Quasi and academia, we had a flood inundation mapping capability available and ready to provide to emergency management. And this inundation map that you see here in the lower right led to the evacuation of what they say what was the Good Samaritan Society during Hurricane Ian. You saw on the left the national tragedy. It's a disgrace. We didn't do our jobs right. And you see on the right is hope. And it's hope born by close collaboration between academia and government, and now with the private sector. We can do better. We can do this. We can do this well.